let's talk about relations. So I had a question earlier about if I wanted to embed another document in a document, how would I do that? Like where they're basically like relationships. Well, there's a few ways you can do that. One, you could just literally just embed the document like this, right, in like as an object, and it's just an object. But if you want this thing to have like an ID, where it's its own separate thing, what you can do is you can actually just add a schema in here as well. These are like nested schemas. I highly recommend not doing that. I almost never do that in production. Instead, what you probably want to do is you want another model and a reference to it here. You want to reference that model with something like an ID, something like a foreign key. So that's something you probably want to do. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to make another schema here, or another model, and we'll call it school. And school is going to be a new mongoose.schema. And right now, we'll just give a school a name. That's about it. And it'll just be a type string. It's not that important. So now we have a school. And then a student belongs to a school. So we have two options. If you've ever done any relational data data building or data configuration, then you know that we could store the students array on the school, or we can store the school on the student. All right, it really depends on how you're trying to query this data. Like if we're going to be reading from the school all the time, you might put the students on the school, but then you have an array that can be infinitely big, so you might have a problem. Or you might just keep it one-to-one and put the school on the student, and that way you're good to go. We're just going to put the school on the student for now. So for here, what we're going to do is we'll just make another field on the student, and we'll just call it school. And the first thing we do is we're going to give it a type. Now, if the type is going to be a reference to some other document somewhere, then we need that to be like something reliable, something unique. By default, the most unique thing in the database is going to be an ID. So that's the type that we're going to use. So we want to use the object ID type, which is just going to be mongoose.schema with a capital S, .types with a capital T, .object ID. So that's the object ID type. This is saying this type is going to be the same object ID type that all of our underscore IDs are composed of inside of Mongo. This alone is not telling Mongo that this is referring to a school somewhere. It's just saying there's a field called school and its type is an ID. That's all it's doing. We still got to do some little more work here. Two, this should be required because all students should be in school. So this is required. Still, this doesn't tell Mongo and Mongoose that this school value is belonging to an actual school model. So the last thing we want to do, and we can do this here, we can do this at query time. There's a lot of places we can do it, but I think it makes more sense to do it on a schema, and that's to provide a reference. So the reference is going to be the collection in which this ID is going to belong to. When we query for this later, Mongoose is automatically going to go to that collection like, oh yeah, I'm going to the collection that you told me to find this matching ID. So what we can do is we can just put ref, and then we put the name of the collection. Now, if we rewind back to what I said about naming collections, the collection name is going to be whatever name that you pass into this first argument right here, mongoose.model. It's not going to be, you don't have to think ahead of time and add the pluralized version. You can just put whatever you put here. So in this case, the school one, which we haven't made yet, let's go ahead and make it. School equals, or mongoose.model, and we'll just use school lowercase, and we'll put the school schema there. There we go. So school lowercase, place the school in there, we get a school model. So if that's going to be the name of our collection for school, then the reference for the school field on the student schema is just going to be called school as well. So walking through this is saying on student.school, its type is going to be an object ID. It is required. And when I ask for it, Mongoose, I want you to match this ID with something in the school collection. That's what it's doing. We can point this to any collection. but we decided to do school. Any questions on this part?
So that's how what it tells you to save it in separate areas, right? If you do the reference, right? Otherwise, you would put it all in the same document, kind of.
No, it will not save it in it won't save it in both collections for you. You still have to save it separately. So if you're asking if
it won't save it in the other collection.
No, right, because it only exists in one collection. So when we start querying this, I'm going to show you it's all virtual. It's not like a join table or like some table that you created that's actually it's a virtual thing. It's basically it's going you can imagine it's going to like create like a table at like query time and grab it for you if it exists, but it's not saved in a database like that. A school is ever only going to exist in the school collection, and then the student's ever only going to refer to it by an ID. That's it. So if you were to, and IDs never change, so you don't have to change the ID inside the student.school because IDs never change. And then if you create a new school, then you have a new student with that school ID. So you almost never have to change these things. It's only when you add some field that changes a lot where you have to update them. But in this case, we don't. And that's because we're only using references that don't change. So we don't have to worry about figuring out how to update them. It should be good to go. Other than the fact that if you delete a school and you're referring to something that's not there anymore, then yeah, you have to clean that up yourself. And you're going to be doing that in one of the exercises. Okay. Yeah.